Now, there is always so much talk about Trump is the most tyrannical, dictatorial president ever.
Meets the textbook definition of fascism.
The rhetoric of Adolf Hitler is once again alive and well on a national political stage.
It's directly out of Hitler's playbook. This is out of an autocrat playbook.
A far-right dictatorial regime like Hitler's Germany or Franco's Spain or Mussolini's Italy.
Trump is the most evil president ever.
Similarities between Mussolini and Hitler towards autocracy and dictatorship.
Everything Trump does is unconstitutional.
That is a constitutional crisis.
Causing a constitutional crisis.
In constitutional crisis.
We are in a constitutional crisis.
That this is a genuine constitutional crisis.
Constitutional crisis.
Witnessing is a constitutional crisis.
Well, I'm going to give you some context on that to look throughout history and give you the most perfect mirror there could possibly be to who Donald Trump is actually like. The astonishing part of doing the research for this video was realizing that Trump himself has given more clues than Scooby-Doo and the gang could need to let you know who he actually wants to be compared to.
Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson. General Andrew Jackson of Tennessee.
I'm a big Andrew Jackson fan.
We are the country of Andrew Jackson. Have great respect for Andrew Jackson.
It's the state of Andrew Jackson, a great president and a great general, by the way. Andrew Jackson, who continues to be on the $20 bills. You know that.
We were just mentioning that Andrew Jackson, who is on the wall.
Andrew Jackson, we thank you for your service. We honor you for your memory.
Was a military hero and genius.
Yes, that's right. The general war hero of the War of 1812 and the founder of the Democratic Party, Andrew Jackson. And not only did Trump have Jackson's portrait in the Oval Office for the first term and now the second term, but he has the miniature version of the famous Andrew Jackson statue that's in front of the White House behind him all the time. And more than that, he actually has the second portrait of Andrew Jackson hanging in the Oval Office right now. Right out of the gate, there are comparisons from how the campaigns of 1824 and 2016 were conducted with heavy media scrutiny.
We had the greatest election. In all fairness, I used to hear Andrew Jackson. This was now greater than the election of Andrew Jackson. People say that.
Andrew Jackson and Abraham Lincoln and many of our greatest presidents fought with the media and called them out, oftentimes on their lies.
Jackson used to sit in a chair, read the newspapers, and write notes in between the lines about who he wanted to go after for saying something about him or his wife.
Andrew Jackson was called many names, accused of many things.
They say Andrew Jackson was always the nastiest campaign. They actually said we topped it.
Andrew Jackson was the first populist president and created the mold for how we think of populist politicians. Jackson and Trump both felt that their previous elections were totally rigged, but only in Andrew Jackson's case was it actually completely rigged. That's the story of 1824. Jackson beat John Quincy Adams in the popular vote and the Electoral College, and of course won more states, and still, long story short, lost. Imagine how mad Trump and his fans would have been had that happened in 2020. Jackson and his crew called what happened in 1824 the corrupt bargain, which Trump still constantly uses the same word about the 2020 election.
The presidential election of 2020 is rigged and corrupt.
Furthermore, both Jackson and Trump should actually thank their 1824 and 2020 election losses, as it emboldened them to have the clear and popular wins in 1828 and 2024 that they had, since both Quincy Adams and Joe Biden's terms were a bit of a disaster.
Let me start off with two words. Made in America. America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was going to put
Andrew and Donald were also seen as one of the common people versus the elitists like Obama, Clinton, and Biden before, or in Jackson's case, the high-profile aristocrats of Washington, Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, and the Adams before. Even though both were wildly famous, wealthy, and connected before they ran for president.
Who is your favorite outsider who people didn't see as someone who was part of the establishment and managed to upend things?
Well, actually, you go back 200 years. Andrew Jackson transformed American politics and in many ways reinvented the American presidency, running as an outsider. Certainly the establishment was horrified.
Jackson, like Trump, was also an unabashedly America First styled president.
He understood that real leadership means putting America first.
Now, on the 1824 campaign and the subsequent 1828 campaign, where Jackson tried to get back at Quincy Adams, they were about the most vicious in American history. Truly more than the Trump-era campaigns of 2016, 2020, and 2024, especially when you factor in the era which was one of speaking in proper terms and respectful mannerisms, all at a time when the country was, for the most part, very close-knit and moving in basically the same patriotic direction. Go look at what Quincy Adams and Jackson threw at each other during that election season. People may feel Trump needs to stop talking about Biden and bashing him at every moment and every press conference.
Oh, what a shot!
You think Biden can do that? I don't know.
Think Biden could get into that car? I don't think so. You think Biden can do that? I don't think so. I don't think so.
But in Andrew Jackson's time, he did the same thing to John Quincy Adams at every possible moment during that first campaign as well. It's just we didn't have the media like we have today. And speaking of Trump golfing in Florida, his beloved state, and Mar-a-Lago, Jackson himself was the main reason the United States has the Sunshine State, leading the fight in the First Seminole War and grabbing it from the Spanish in 1818, though there were many controversies associated with that as well. Jackson constantly picked fights with everyone, just as he had during his years as a general, and just as Donald Trump does, and longs to every minute that he can with anyone he can. Andrew Jackson, like Trump, didn't care what Congress said. And Jackson didn't care what the Supreme Court said either.
He's taking power away from the Article 3 of the Constitution, judiciary. How is he doing that? He has actually said, I am not bound by the federal courts if I disagree.
Yes, even more so than Donald Trump. Andrew Jackson took on the Central Bank of the United States, called it evil, and said he wouldn't stop until it was gone. Same as Trump is doing with many things, from the Department of Education to USAID, that previously everyone thought was completely fine and probably unimaginable to partly dismantle, let alone totally destroy, as Andrew Jackson did with the Bank of the United States. The bank also called Jackson's attempt to kill the bank a manifesto for anarchy, pretty much like every government official says about everything Trump does.
You've got dictatorship and anarchy at the same time.
Jackson, like Trump, only hired people who were completely indebted to him and were prepared to back whatever policy Jackson wanted. When Jackson couldn't manage his cabinet during a controversy, he promptly fired them. He continued to fire anyone that didn't go along with what he said. In the end, Jackson burned through 4 Secretary of States and 5 Secretary of the Treasuries, including 3 just during the whole Bank of the United States fiasco. Many of Jackson's actions were called an act of a willful tyrant, as many of Trump's detractors say daily today.
What this means is tyranny.
Donald Trump is running to be an American tyrant.
Be a tyrant. We've saw plenty of examples of that recently.
Donald Trump just behaved like a tyrant.
The press in Jackson's time used drawings of him as a king, King Andrew I, just as Time magazine did recently with Trump. They also said Andrew Jackson was exercising power in a way that no one had done before. Once again, exactly the same rhetoric as everyone from MSNBC to CNN to the New York Times today talk about Trump.
We are now on the verge of a dictatorship.
But Jackson's response was, I can do anything I want. I'm an independent power. Which once again sounds like Trump and his cabinet and his Trumpets every day.
Well, I have the ultimate authority. The President of the United States has the authority to do what the President... The authority is total, and that's the way it's got to be.
The authority is total.
It's total. The President of the United States calls the shots.
If you think many feel that a slew of Trump's actions could be unconstitutional, the Senate during Jackson's time passed a resolution of censure, an action never taken before or since on a president, as they were so very afraid of his unhinged statements and actions. Jackson, like Trump today, used phrases that evoked how the people, not the government, had the power over law, and the people elected him as president, so he should be able to do whatever the heck he wants. All of this set a new standard on how powerful the president was. And now to tariffs. Jackson used tariffs to solve the debt issue, which had been bubbling since the Revolutionary War. While Calvin Coolidge was the last president to make the government smaller when he left than when he was sworn in, and Bill Clinton is the last president to balance the budget, as Coolidge also did before him, Jackson was the only president to actually completely eliminate the U.S. debt. Now, it was a different time. The tariffs in that situation cannot be related in any way to today's tariffs. And most stunningly of all, you thought when Trump wanted to hang Mike Pence on January 6, 2021, or at least alluded to it on Twitter that he wouldn't mind if the protesters did hang Mike Pence, Could that have ever happened before? No. But yes, Andrew Jackson had such a battle with his vice president, John C. Calhoun, over a tariff dispute that actually foreshadowed things that led up to the Civil War. He vowed to send an army to South Carolina and hang his own VP, Calhoun, on the first tree that he found. Calhoun said that he was genuinely scared for his life, as Mike Pence said that he was on January 6, 2021. Most hilarious because Calhoun always seemed to look like he was about to get hung. And that is where the comparisons stop. Trump, of course, has not picked a group of people to be completely thrown out of the country as of yet, with no rights, as Andrew Jackson did with the Native Americans in 1830. Even though some Choctaw natives fought with him at his greatest hour, the Battle of New Orleans in January of 1815, and created the entire aura that was Andrew Jackson. And he still threw them out. So remember, no matter how much you might hate Donald Trump and think he is by far the most evil and worst president of all time, he still isn't even Andrew Jackson. Or at the very worst is about the same, minus the Trail of Tears, which is a pretty bad mark on Jackson's presidency. And Jackson isn't even close to Woodrow Wilson or FDR in terms of foundationally changing the country and its values, along with being an incredibly dictatorial and tyrannical leader. Although number one on that list actually might be Abraham Lincoln. But that's a video for another time.